The Executive Director for India at the IMF, Surjit Bhalla, is now joining us here on Times Now and as part of this special program on the Modi bailout package. Let me welcome you, Mr. Bhalla, to Times Now. I won't waste too much time on asking you questions about why we need a bailout. That is a settled issue. I'm going to ask you simply this. Is the US dollar 266 billion or the rupees 20 lakh crore package the answer to all the woes that are arising out of the dislocation that the economy is facing on the back of the COVID outbreak? And is it enough?
Yeah. Look, we have to look at the whole crisis internationally. We are not the only country, and your question is very reasonable. What is enough? I do not know what is enough. What we can do is to see if what the government of India is doing in terms of the package, how does it compare to other countries? Remember, this is a global pandemic. All countries are facing this. In that context, the short answer is that the package that is announced, and I will only the 20 lakh crores, is very, very reasonable, very relatively quite high. And if you look at just the fiscal component alone, which is likely to be somewhere around 5 to 6% of GDP, this will place us amongst the top 5 countries in the world in terms of the fiscal package. Remember, when we are saying the world, there are 202 countries where the COVID pandemic has struck. So this is truly universal. And if our package is about 5% of GDP, just the fiscal side, the rest is monetary, then I think it is quite a phenomenal achievement to place this.
Well, let me ask you, certain questions have been raised by the Congress party, by the left parties, other components of the opposition, and they're saying, how is it that repaying your tax refunds is now your stimulus? How is a loan a stimulus package? Is reclassifying SSIs, micro enterprises and MSMEs such a big, monumental decision? If it is, then why wasn't it taken earlier? What is this 25% TDS reduction all about? This is not a stimulus, they're saying. This is what was already promised in some measures to the Aam Aadmi Party, and now it's been sort of put together and committed to the table in the garb of a stimulus.
Yeah. Good question. First of all, let me address this, that why wasn't it done earlier? And I think across the world, we can dismiss that question. Why wasn't it done earlier? We can do, for example, the Essential Commodities Act being eliminated, the APMC being finally reformed. We argued this in part of the HLAC committee report. So one can always, no matter what the reform, every reform in India has been talked about at one time or another for the last 30 years, or at least 40 years. So that is really quite irrelevant. Why wasn't it done earlier? It's a legitimate point. Yes, we should have done this in 1980. Fair enough. Second, I should have mentioned that apart from it being a global pandemic, it is literally a political pandemic in every country of the world. So therefore, every country has politicized this issue. And, we are a modern global world, democracies especially, so it should be political. There's nothing that is not political. So I'm not at all surprised that the opposition is making some claims, etc. Now we come to the legitimate point about a stimulus. Now, what defines a stimulus? We can have a stimulus where we literally give cash in your hands. And this is what the world did in 2008-9, including India. And then we had, if you will, very, very high inflation, going up to 13, 15%. It averaged more than 11% on an annual basis for several years. So I think the world has learned a lesson from it. And I would just ask you, the Congress Party, any interested party, to look at what other countries are doing. And they are also doing very similar. In other words, they are having that, look, you don't pay taxes now, you pay taxes later. There are, if you will, a lot of expenditures that were in the, for example, states will get money from the discoms will get money. Would this money have been, it is due to them, absolutely correct. But would they have got the money? We've been arguing, several of us have been asking this question, when will the government pay the discoms money? Or when will the states pay the discoms money? So the fact is, or MSMEs, they are not getting loans. So if you're getting a loan guarantee, remember just day before yesterday, not literally day before yesterday, but just about a month or 2 months ago, we were all clamoring, I'm sure your show did the same, that the MSMEs are in dire shape because the banks are not lending to them. Now, with the stimulus package, banks will lend to them. So the point is the economy, look at the word stimulus, the economy will be stimulated. What the source of that stimulus is, we can argue about, is it appropriate, is it not, etc. Will this help the economy? And on that score, it should be counted as a stimulus rather than, look, we were due this money before, etc. Was it coming to them? Or is there money in your pocket? Can you now get a loan, which you weren't able to get before? So I think all of that, and mind you, how you look at, and the IMF has a very nice website where they have a policy tracker. Every country in the world is publicly available. And I think all of us should just look at that policy tracker to see what the other countries are doing. We are not, and they are also including in their stimulus package all these other forms. For example, Germany has, we've all seen it, that it's 10% of GDP that they are giving as part of the stimulus. You look at it in terms of what you and I would define as a fiscal stimulus, it's half that. It's only 5%. So I just want to put this into a proper perspective. All countries are doing what we are doing, or we are doing very similar to what all other countries are doing in terms of defining the stimulus.
Okay, so when P. Chidambaram comes out and says that the slew of liquidity-related measures spelt out by the government do not qualify as fiscal stimulus, are you saying that he's only opposing for the sake of opposing? He hasn't really looked at what other countries are doing? Because at the press conference today, when Nirmala Sitharaman was speaking, one of the officers from a ministry alluded to the facts that you've pulled out, saying that look at the packages announced by other countries. It's not all about cost to government. It's not all about putting money in the hands of individuals. There are different configurations and different manners in which we are trying to lift people out of the doldrums, so to speak. So are you saying that the Chidambarams of the world are being politic?
Well, I think everybody in the world, Rahul, is doing politics. That's what I started my conversation with, and it's a very important point to recognize. That's what, politicians do, and that's what they're supposed to do, and that's why people vote for them. If you're in the opposition, you have to criticize the government no matter what, and if you are in the government, you have to support the government. That's not the issue here. The issue here is whether, first of all, as I mentioned, whether Mr. Chidambaram or anybody else has actually looked at the data for the other countries And I'm giving you that and I can post this, and everybody can just go policy tracker of the IMF, and Mr. Chidambaram and you and everybody else will be able to see what other countries are doing. And in that context, I can say with quite a bit of confidence that this is a genuinely large stimulus on the fiscal side. I'm excluding on the monetary side, which also all countries are doing. They're reducing rates and so on and so forth. But on the fiscal side, the stimulus I think you are interested in about the economy, whether people are getting, whether economic activity will be stimulated, this is definitely a large part of the package of the government of India. I should also mention, unlike other countries, now there may be few, I think Indonesia is going to reduce tax rates, corporate tax rates slightly, but we are likely to emerge, and remember, this is an ongoing story. India is likely to emerge as the one country that also brought in significant, large, overdue economic reforms. This I've not seen. Now, one argument could be, so I'm giving fodder to the politicians, but they were in power for most of the last 60 years when these anti-reform measures were put in, that we were overdue for reforms. Absolutely. But the point is, did we do these reforms before? We did not. And so India, in a comparative sense, will turn out to be a real positive outlier that they brought in major economic reforms in the wake of the pandemic.
So some of these reforms that have created ripples are to do with the labor sector. A large number of states have gone ahead in anticipation of, obviously, the flight of capital to make themselves more attractive, and they have made large number of tweaks in the labor laws. Yes, they're temporary for 3 years, but they say that this is vital because it will help businessmen reinvigorate themselves. Now, a large number of people in the country are saying that this is an assault on human rights.
Yeah.
How do you assess this criticism?
Okay. Very important question. And I think, I myself, as an economist, as a researcher, have written quite a bit on labor reform. So have most economists. And everybody, I don't know, it'd be very interesting to see, and in all the criticism that I've seen, they are not saying that the labor reform shouldn't come about. They're saying you have assaulted human rights, you've done this, you've done that, etc. Again, if there was one universal view amongst the left, the right, the Congress, the non-Congress, the BJP, even perhaps the CPM, but I don't want to talk for the CPM, was saying that we've got antiquated labor laws, we need to reform them. Now, in the wake of this, so when I looked at the labor reforms that have been announced in UP, it is that the bonded labor is protected, and there are 3 other laws that are kept. It could be the case that some laws need to be tweaked. In other words, in UP, they did a wholesale rejection of all the laws and only kept 4. I do not know. We'll have to look at it in detail. But I do think that one of the major mega problems plaguing the Indian economy for the last 30, 40, 50 years is the fact that the firm size is very, very small, historically, comparatively with every country. This elimination of these quite unnecessary labor laws, and one of the laws is there that you have to have a matka in the factory. Okay, this is one of the laws that exist and now have been abolished. So I think This is a radical step, much needed step, and to wait and see whether the human right of the workers not having a job and being paid much less than their counterparts in the rest of the world was a great assault on human rights. That they perhaps can't unionize now.
Okay, let me ask you something else that has become a topic of discussion. The measures to revive MSMEs. Many people are saying that they're not enough. Let me quote what the Federation of the MSMEs President Animesh Saxena told the press. He said that the industry is on ventilator and needed oxygen support and not medicine, which will work in 3 months. We needed oxygen and immediate ventilator. I don't need credit lines. I need cash in hand. How do you view this?
Okay. First of all, if one looks at the package announced for the SMEs, and as you know, this thing has been going on for the last 2.5 years, much before the COVID crisis, that 1.8% of GDP has been announced for the SMEs, collateral-free automatic loans, subordinated debt, and equity infusion. Now, clearly, everybody is in the business of asking for money, and it's a never-ending game. You can always say now, unless the SME president, whoever you quote, is saying the equity infusion does not provide him with money, if he's saying he cannot go and now borrow when he's got a guaranteed loan or the guarantee given by the government, then I'm afraid he's in a different economic zone than any.
Okay, I want to ask you one last question, Mr. Bhalla, before I let you go. Is it or is it not true that the immediate fiscal impact on the government for its MSME provisions is quite low as compared to what government banks and other public entities may have had to endure? Given how PSBs too suffered the worst of the NPA crisis, is the government pushing banks in a corner here? And why would they want to lend when their exposure is so great to defaults from MSMEs?
Okay, precisely. That's what guaranteed loans are about. That's what the equity infusion is about. It is not as if the MSMEs or which the entity is, whatever they want, and there will be no checks and balances. The banks were not lending to them before. That is what we all complain about. Lazy banking is what we all complain about. This is a big step forward. Doesn't mean there won't be any more lazy banking, and we'll have to bank from another time. But it does mean that today the SMEs are getting a significant amount of capital in order to continue with operations.
Thank you, Mr. Bhalla, for speaking to Times Now. This has been an enriching conversation. Thank you so much.
My pleasure. Thank you.